Way to go, Tic Tac!
That's how you punch.
Wakanda forever!
You wouldn't have heard of me.
Let me put you on hold.
Dance off, bro! He's a friend from work!
I can do this all day.
Yeah, I know.
What up, guys? It's Dom, and welcome back to another movie review. Today we are going over and ranking Hitman. Hitman, released in 2023, written and directed by Richard Linklater. A professor moonlighting as a hitman of sorts for his city police department descends into dangerous, dubious territory when he finds himself attracted to a woman who enlists his services. Now, I've heard a lot of hype about this movie in the past 2 years when it originally came out, and when I saw the trailer, I thought it could be something good. I thought maybe it was kind of a goofy topic, but it was just a comedy, so I thought maybe it could at least get a laugh out of me. I watched it, and honestly, I found myself enjoying it a decent amount. I thought for a comedy, it had an amazing story behind it. So, without further ado, let's just get right into the 10 essential aspects of a movie. The first essential aspect is plot. So I was pleasantly surprised by this plot because usually pure comedies don't have good plots. They just focus a lot on getting the audience to laugh, and that's their main goal with the movie. So they're not going to write a full in-depth story to kind of engage you, because then it's not really a pure comedy. But this movie, I was under the assumption it was going to do the same thing, but instead it actually had a very well-written plot. I thought that the story that they were bringing towards the audience was something that I actually found myself engaging in. I was enjoying it. I was on the edge of my seat kind of just watching, waiting to see what happens next. And I don't usually get that out of a lot of comedies. So they did the job that they were supposed to with being funny, but also having a story that's actually engaging, that's enticing, that the audience wants to see more of. So plot is something they definitely did well. The second essential aspect is attraction. So what's funny about this is, obviously this is a pure comedy, and it is funny. It does have its moments where it is actually making me laugh, but that's honestly not what I'm focused on. I'm focused on the good story. I'm focused on the plot more. So it's weird that somehow in comedies where plot takes a back seat and comedy takes a front seat, in this comedy, plot took a front seat and comedy took a back seat. It is very weird to see, but honestly, I like that for the better. I feel like if they kind of made the story worse and made the comedy better, the movie wouldn't be as good. But they somehow did this. I don't know if it was accidentally or if it was on purpose. I don't know why it's labeled as a pure comedy because of this. So I don't know. Attractive. It's definitely an interesting story. It has a great concept. I love the concept, and it is funny while not being overly comedic and taken away from that story. The third essential aspect is theme. So there's a very clear message that this movie is trying to give you, and Gary even says it at the end of the movie to his students. You want to seize the identity that you want. You can be anyone you want to be in this world. You just have to be them, right? So he wanted to be Ron, one of his hitman identities that he used in this movie, because he liked that life more than Gary, the basic professor's life. And he wanted it, so he became it. He still had everything that he liked about being Gary, but then he took everything that he liked about being Ron, kind of put them together to make one super life. So that's really something that anyone can do. Anyone can really become who they want to be. If you dream to be something specific, go for that dream and do everything you can to become that. So that's really the goal that it was that's the theme that this movie was trying to bring upon you, to really reach for your goals and go after them. The fourth essential aspect is dialogue. So this is where this movie did lack a little bit, and that is because it is a comedy. They're not supposed to have great dialogue. That's not the whole point of it. The whole point is to have funny dialogue, to bring some laughs out of the audience. So that's something that is expected with a full comedy movie. I do think that one good thing of dialogue did occur, and that was Glenn Powell's different accents when it came to all his different identities. None of them sounded the same, whether it was just his normal voice originally and then turned into whatever else he could conjure up. But I think that kind of dialogue was interesting, that he actually did change depending on which version of the hitman he was. He spoke differently, he acted differently. So that in general in dialogue was good. But when it came to overall just conversations being had, some of them did feel real, especially between the main characters, but if it was a side character on screen, it sounded super fake. The fifth essential aspect is acting. So this is also a thing in the movie where it wasn't the best, except for two. There's two specific actors that did a fantastic job, I believe, in this movie, and it is the two main actors. But everyone else they did decent. It's passable at most. There were some that were not good, but it's not really the main focal point of this movie, so it's not something I'm really paying attention to as often as the main characters. But the two main characters that did do really well were Glenn Powell, who played Gary. He was the complete star of the movie. Him and Madison's life is what you're really looking for with this movie. She is the girl that he fell in love with, and he is obviously the main hitman that you follow his life throughout this movie. So if he did a worse job, this movie would be pretty bad. But instead, he did an amazing job, especially when it came to him taking on these different personalities that he's created to be these different hitmen. So he did a really good job because it convinced me that he was playing these different characters. Not only is he playing Gary because he is obviously the actor playing Gary, but he's also Gary playing these people. So it has like two levels of acting in it, and that is something that's pretty difficult to do sometimes, especially in a convincing manner. So I have to give him the credit for that. And Ariana, who played Madison, is the love interest, is the woman that tried to hire him originally, but instead they kind of fell for each other. So her acting also, it wasn't as good as Glenn Powell's, but it was still very good where it didn't pull me out. It was convincing acting. Especially there was one scene where they were arguing, and both of their actings were extremely convincing. It did feel like a drama while they were arguing that way, which is very good. That kind of acting is hard to do, to really portray that level of emotion. So both of them did a really good job in this movie, and without them, this movie wouldn't be nearly as good. The sixth essential aspect is cinematography. I think this movie does well in both. For the visuals, I mean, it looks fine. I do think the actual wardrobe choices for each character is what you're really focused on when it comes to the cinematography, and that is just because there's so many completely different outfits to fit the specific version of the hitman that he is trying to be that day. So that is cool to see, and it's not something that's really crazy, brain exploding, like really good cinematography, but it's something that it does catch your eye. And then for the emotional aspect, I love the relationship that these two had. I think that is something that pushed this movie higher up for me, is because they had a very convincing relationship. You wanted them to get together. You wanted it to work out in the end. You were rooting for Gary the whole time. So that the emotional side is something that they definitely had. But towards the end, it did kind of fizz out. It wasn't as much of an emotional thing, but then you got it back again at the end. So it did have this little lapse of the emotion not being there, but it's okay because the rest of the movie had it. So it's just that little scene, but I had to call it out. The seventh essential aspect is editing. So this movie is an hour and 55 minutes long, and usually I would say that comedies should not go over an hour and a half. That if their whole goal is to make it laugh, obviously it shouldn't be wasting 2 hours of your time. But this one, for example, since the plot didn't take a backseat, it was enjoyable for 2 hours. I'm fine with it being 2 hours. If it was slightly shorter, I wouldn't complain. There were some scenes that felt sort of unnecessary. They weren't completely unnecessary, but if they were removed, it wouldn't change too much. So if it was shorter, great, but I am fine with the 2 hour mark that it reached. The eighth essential aspect is soundtrack. So I don't remember the soundtrack completely. I know there was some, and it was kind of upbeat, but it's not something that's going to be memorable where you know this movie by its soundtrack. The ninth essential aspect is directing. So I feel like it's the director's job to take these previous 8 essential aspects, put them together to make a movie that's worth watching. And the director of this movie is Richard Linklater, and he's previously directed 22 movies, so bear with me here while I list them off. It's Impossible to Learn to Plow by Reading Books, Slacker, Dazed and Confused, Before Sunrise, Suburbia, The Newton Boys, Waking Life, Tape, School of Rock, Before Sunset, Bad News Bears, Fast Food Nation, A Scanner Darkly, Inning by Inning, A Portrait of a Coach, Me and Orson Welles, Bernie, Before Midnight, Boyhood, Everybody Wants Some, Last Flag Flying, Where Do You Go, Bernadette, and Apollo 10.5, A Space Age Childhood. Holy moly, that is a lot of movies to list off. Obviously, I have barely seen any of these. I've seen School of Rock, and that is about it on this list that I know I've watched. So I don't know his prior experiences, but if he has 22 different movies and he's still going strong, I mean, he definitely has the experience. And he did make a good movie here, so I do have to give him credit. For his 23rd movie, it was a good one. So I can't really say that he doesn't deserve a spot with the resume that he had. And the 10th essential aspect is time. So I don't think this movie will stand the test of time. To me, I'm kind of picturing it like The Fall Guy, where it's a good movie and I love watching it and I couldn't see myself rewatching it again if I remember that it exists. So I'm obviously going to remember all these movies exist because I do reviews and they're on my channel and I have a list of what I've done so far, so I don't repeat anything, obviously. So I'll never forget that I've done this review. But if I was just watching this casually, it's a great movie in the moment. But I feel like 2 years down the line, it might not be one that I would be like, oh, that was a great movie, I got to rewatch that again. Maybe if it pops up on Netflix, but not just in my mind will I really remember this movie. So in the moment, this was a great movie. I'm glad I watched it because it was good. However, I don't think it will stand the test of time, unfortunately. It just doesn't have something so out of this world where it's super memorable. So I can't give it to it. Now, on to the reviews. So, Rotten Tomatoes critics gave it a 95%, Rotten Tomatoes audience gave it a 91%, and IMDb gave it a 68%. Now, I'm honestly not agreeing with any of these. I think it belongs in the 80s. I think an 80 to an 85 is probably the best bet because it does have some issues, but not enough to really push it down to being a bad movie. I think 80, which is very good for all movies of all time, is a pretty good range, and I would go up to 85 because I did enjoy it. I did enjoy the concept. I thought it was funny. It had a good plot. It's just that it's not memorable, and that's a big thing. And of course, the dialogue issues, the acting issues for the non-main characters, just because it is a comedy, and I get that too. But it does have little things that bother me about it that wouldn't. I can't put it in that 90 mark, but it doesn't have enough where I would put it down in like that 60 mark. I couldn't do that. And finally, the rankings. So in 2023, it's going to be second, above Barbie and below Air. Now, I'm barely going to even have to explain why it's in this position. I personally like this concept a lot more, and even honestly the acting and the relationship that the two main characters have a lot more than in Barbie. I feel like Barbie and Ken had a good relationship, and it was something that you wanted to see how it ended up, but you didn't have as much of an emotional connection to them as you did to Gary and Madison. So that's really a big thing, because these movies honestly are very similar to me. They're both comedic, they both have an interesting concept, but I feel like Hitman just did it better. And below Air, I mean, Air is a really good movie. It's up there for some of my favorites. I could not see myself putting Hitman over it. Air is much more memorable to me. I will forever remember that movie. I can't say the same thing about Hitman. That's really the big key here. In the 2020s, it's going to be seventh. Again, above Barbie, but below Inside Out 2. Now, I'm not going to explain why it's above Barbie again, because I just did, but Inside Out 2, I think that is the better movie overall. It's the more memorable one. I think the concept of it, especially based off of Inside Out, the concept is just really good, and the way that they expanded on that world, it was a very good way of making puberty the main thing that causes changes, because they wouldn't be able to make an Inside Out 2 without adding that extra element. And they found a good one to add, because in reality, your emotions do get swayed once that part hits. So I thought that was a very interesting concept. I thought the plot was very interesting, and overall I just liked the feel of that movie more than Hitman. Not by a lot, but I definitely did. And in all time, it's going to be 21st, above Spectral, but again below Inside Out 2. Again, I'm not going to explain why it's below Inside Out 2, because I just did. But it is above Spectral just because the concept is more interesting in Spectral, but the rewatchability is what really does it for me. You can't rewatch that movie and still have the excitement that you have the first time. Because for me, I loved watching that movie because I wanted to figure out who these Spectrals were. But now that I know who they are, it's not as enjoyable to watch. And that does take a big hit on a movie, especially mystery movies and movies like that, where the concept is something that you want the audience to discover with the characters. It's hard to make that really stand the test of time. And I just think Hitman just has almost as good of a concept, and it has definitely good acting in it, and overall just a fun movie in general, a better movie experience. So that's really why I put it above it. That's all I have for Hitman. If you guys enjoyed this review, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and make sure to comment what movie you want me to review next. I have a poll going on in my posts on my channel to see what I'm going to do now that I've hit 1,000 subscribers. So please go vote on that. I'm going to give it another week, and then I'm going to do whatever the voted option was. So definitely go check that out. And if you want to see someone that does the same thing as me, check out my best friend, Mr. Majoritarian. He has the same exact style of movie reviewing where he ranks them in its year, decade, and in all time. He goes over the 10 essential aspects in the reviews. He just has obviously a different list than me because we have two different opinions. So definitely go check him out if you want to see that. His link will always be in my description. And I hope you guys have an amazing night. Peace out.